Welcome to Thieves' Cant, a tabletop gaming podcast, with your hosts, Jeremy Shane and Chris White.
Welcome back to Thieves' Cant. Jeremy Shane.
And Chris White.
Back again. It is Saturday, March 15th. Thanks so much for joining us. Chris, last week we were talking mud rain, and this week it's tornadoes. I tell you what, every Friday night around here, we've got a different weather pattern developing.
Yeah, we were hunkered down in the basement until 1 o'clock last night, so I should be chipper and full of energy for this episode.
Bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. In today's episode, we're going to check out a really cool solo RPG. This one is from Lion Banner Games. In our main topic, we've got the Lowdown. We have scoured the streets. We have dared the back alleys. Chris, we have sifted through every ale-soaked thieves' den on the internet. And we have compiled your greatest GM regrets for our main topic.
Absolutely.
But first, let's get into the news. We've got to give a quick mention to Shadowdark, the Western Reaches from Arcane Library. It is launched on Kickstarter. That launched this past Tuesday. Didn't take long for this to become the first $1 million Kickstarter in 2025. Chris, it happened in like 12 hours.
12 hours? Wow.
Folks love them some Shadowdark.
That's a little more than I make an hour. That's great, though. Yeah, I mean, this game is super popular. We're going to have to play. So
checking the current total, again, this is as of March 15th, we're sitting at $1,427,000. It's got 25 days left. This one runs until April 9th. You think they can hit $2 million?
Absolutely. I might have to contribute myself.
So this is the Western Reaches, Shadowdark, getting into some world building now, a setting.
Yeah, I understand there's some changes to, or some additional character classes or subclasses. I'm not sure how it works. But
maybe some new character options available for you?
Yes.
All right. So, again, Shadowdark does not need our publicity. But man, we cannot not mention the first $1 million TTRPG Kickstarter of 2025. Congrats to everybody over at Arcane Library. Chris, you have been begging me to join you in this video game that you love so much, Helldivers.
It really comes down to how much you want to engage in the fight for managed democracy, how much you love freedom. That's what it comes down to. Helldivers 2, third-person shooter, cooperative, multiplayer, very popular on the PlayStation Network and on Steam. So yeah, now they have the board game coming out. It looks like it's designed for 1 to 4 players. So there is solo and cooperative play.
I love that.
Yes. The box is beautiful, by the way. I don't know if you saw it, but it's magnificent. So you're taking on the role of Helldivers. You're defending Super Earth from alien threats. So yeah, if you're not familiar with Helldivers at all, you're sort of the villains in the universe, but you definitely don't see it that way. You're in your mind, you're the heroes, and so it's really fun. This is going to be, of course, a strategic cooperation, so it's the same idea. Yeah, a variety of weapons. You can call in like airstrikes or orbital strikes, or if you want to throw down mines. All that stuff is there that you see in the game. And then it says players must contend with evolving threats and objectives as well as hazards like explosions and friendly fire. So, yeah, there has to be friendly fire or it definitely doesn't capture the essence of the game. I play with my son. Yeah. And we do on occasion blow each other across the map.
Sorry, Dad.
Yeah, it happens. Well, usually I'm the offender. So,
yeah. Well, this sounds fun. So a board game analog, and if you're a fan of the video game like Chris is, and you're wondering, all right, how is this going to translate to a board game experience? This is being handled by the folks at Steamforged Games. This is not their first rodeo. They have adapted Dark Souls, Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, Elden Ring to great success. I imagine Helldivers 2 is going to deliver in board game format.
So here's the question. If I can't get you to play Helldivers 2, the video game,
Yeah.
am I going to be able to force you to play Helldivers 2, the board game?
You can probably get me to pull up a seat at the table.
Because I feel like
game.
This could be a gateway drug, I feel like. So,
all right, so this is your new plan. Hook me with the board game, and then I'll finally join you in the digital space.
yeah, it's probably easier for me to manipulate you if I don't explain the whole plan, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I'm just letting you know it's coming. So
At least you're not groveling like a worm anymore.
Right.
Right?
Yes, right. Exactly.
All right, so that is Helldivers 2, the board game. That's going to launch on GameFound to begin funding on April 8th, if you feel so inclined. Moving on, DriveThru RPG has announced a price increase. It's going to affect their print-on-demand service. This will take effect April 1st. It's a good thing they got the announcement in prior to April 1st. Now, you don't want to make any significant announcements on that particular day.
That's true.
So their print-on-demand is going up. Black and white printing in the U.S., hardcover titles are going to rise by about 20%. If it's a high page count, it could be up to 50% of an increase. Soft cover titles, even greater price hikes, they say. In the UK, you don't get hit as much. Print costs are expected to increase by about 3 to 4% for that black and white printing. This is pretty significant. I've got to give credit to the folks over on Mastering Dungeons. Great podcast, great RPG podcast. They spoke to how this will impact crowdfunding. If you've got a company that has already collected your money, the project is funded, and they are using DriveThru RPG for their print on demand to deliver that final product, and now the prices are going up, this is going to put everybody involved in a really sticky situation.
Right, and these aren't small increases. 50% for larger hardcover books? Yeah, right. I sincerely doubt that there's budgeting for that. That's going to be a big challenge.
All right, so that'll be a situation to watch as we move forward. That's going to do it for our news. On to crowdfunding. I've been excited to talk about this one. Wrath of the Wyvern, a dark fantasy solo TTRPG. Keyword there, solo. Who's ready for lonely fun?
Always.
It's the only kind of
every
fun I know.
Opportunity. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So this is taken from the Kickstarter page. It combines elements reminiscent of The Witcher and Skyrim. That makes perfect sense for a solo RPG.
I like it already.
Players embark on a solo journey through a gritty, monster-infested world, making impactful choices that reshape their narrative. There's hex crawling. It does use cards instead of dice to resolve any conflicts. It is fully funded, all right? So it's happening. But if it's one of these where you think, all right, it's fully funded, cool, I'll catch it in retail. No, you won't. It's not coming to retail. This is on Kickstarter only. Any additional copies they have left over, just going right to their warehouse, and they will sell them directly.
This is your opportunity.
And it looks like they are actually going to deliver in June. Wrath of the Wyvern. If you like solo play, I love the idea of solo play. And I've got some solo games, but often I have a hard time building up momentum on my own to really get the flow of the game going. This particular game comes with components, all right? You're getting the hex map, you're getting the cards, you're getting a lot of concrete things that will help you get over that hump if you struggle like me to really get a solo game off the ground without that GM energy on the other side of the table.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes it feels like an exercise in futility. Looks like it has a lot of material there that it could be a lot of fun.
So that is Wrath of the Wyvern funding on Kickstarter. We are on to our main topic.
The Lowdown.
Today it is the Lowdown. Again, we have scoured the internet for your feedback. Today we are talking GM regrets. Brother, do we have them? We've all made mistakes.
I've made a few. I've made a few.
We've got to say thanks to some folks out there on the World Wide Web. We've got some great responses from the TTRPG subreddit over on Reddit. Chris, you want to get us going on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And this one's easy to pronounce, so I'm pretty happy about that. Geeky Gamer 49. Biggest regret was an episode where I railroaded my players instead of listening to them.
Nah.
I think we have all, at some point, made this mistake.
If you have worn the GM cap, you have railroaded your players. Now, sometimes of necessity, let us not pretend that there are not times when your group of players, rascals, need to be railroaded, need to be put back on track. Look, we're not going to shop forever, folks. All right, we've got to advance the story. There are things happening here. The world needs saving. But there are also times, of course, where our own ideas seem a little too appealing to us as GMs, and we need to let the players do their thing.
Yeah, I agree. The players are telling, in many ways, they're the ones telling the story, at least their portion of it, and it's important that they have the freedom to do that. And once you start railroading, it just feels very much like you're just basically moving from one encounter to another.
Yeah.
Be it a social encounter or a combat, whatever it may be, it feels like you're just basically crossing off a list of activities rather than actually having the freedom to make decisions. You feel less like you're in a living, breathing world and more like you're on the rails.
Yeah. So how do you avoid that as a GM? How do you step back and give up that narrative control?
In some regards, I think every GM is a manipulator. You have a story, you have encounters, you have locations, you have things you want them to visit. But when you start forcing players to do specific things or forcing actions to happen, I know you and I have had some experiences with this in the past. One campaign in particular, we had a DM. He was fairly inexperienced, and he would basically just tell you the outcome of actions. You know, I know in one part you were pickpocketed and there were no roles involved. It's just, well, you are. And you tried to run him down and he's like, well, he's faster, you know, and so,
yeah.
You know, players, we want to present players with unique challenges, but when we basically just tell them what's happening rather than letting them be a part of it, we've probably stepped a little too far. Yeah. But again, everybody's done this. Like we've, to one degree or another, every DM.
You know, you love the thought of, I'm going to build this world. I'm going to throw all of these components at my players and I want to see how they react. But the flip side must be true. You must also be prepared to react to the players. And in fact, once the game really gets going, that should be what's happening the majority of the time, is the GM reacting rather than the players.
Though I think there are times, and I'll stop, but I think there are times where players kind of want to be railroaded. Like there comes a point where it's just like, look, we don't know where to go from here.
Yeah. Throw us a bone.
Yeah.
Point us in the right direction. Again, Geeky Gamer 49, thanks for your contribution. Barge in the Lane says, early on running 5e, one of my players took a background or feat. They say it's been a while since they've run 5e. That gave them an NPC contact. I completely froze when they went to use it, wound up hand-waving it, and I could tell it really sank the player in that moment. Wouldn't be a big deal now, but I just wasn't ready to throw an NPC together like that at the time. There's not much worse as a GM than being frozen in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're caught on the spot. You know, you've done your prep work, you're ready for all of that, and then suddenly a player pulls out this resource and they've got a new NPC. That's a little daunting for a newer DM.
No.
For a more experienced DM, you're just used to it. You're like, well, this is another session, and this is how it happens. I think the critical thing here is that this was definitely an important thing for this character. For this player, excuse me. You know, when they designed the character, like they looked at that NPC contact and they were like, that's pretty cool. And so when they pull that card out, it's a big moment, right? They're saying that this is a part of my character's background, and I would love for this to be put into the game. And so, obviously, if you can do that in a cool way, yeah. But remember, you're still the DM, right? Or GM, excuse me. I use those phrases
They're
interchangeably.
Yeah.
So just forgive me. I'm not always talking about D&D. But you don't have to do that necessarily on the spot, though. You're still running that. You're in that control of that situation. But the player has voiced that they want to use that resource. So maybe plan it. If you can't do it this session, do it next session. But get that NPC involved, because to the player, that was an important part of their character. And you can have a lot of fun with that. There's a lot of opportunities.
All right. So thanks again to Barge in the Lane.
Our next comment is from Fraud Syndrome FF. And he says, I have two that immediately come to mind.
A double.
You got a double here. It's 2 for 1. A general one about world building. I wish I had more thoroughly thought out the world I'm running my current 5e campaign in. I had some vague ideas and was going to just make stuff up as we went, but we were going into our 4th year and closing in on 50 episodes.
Wow.
It's for a podcast.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Yeah, that's great. And while we've built the world and things are moving along fine, I wish I'd done more of that work on the front side to give my players a more finished, if not polished, world to play in. So let's talk about that one first.
Yeah, let's pause there before we move on to number 2. All right, so again, wish I had thoroughly thought out the world rather than just letting them begin to explore it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a balancing act.
Yeah.
I'm on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I'm working on a homebrew setting right now that I doubt we'll ever see the table because I don't know when enough is enough. I feel like I need to have all of the answers. I need to have all of the context so that I don't have a player throw something at me that I'm not prepared for. I'm trying to avoid freezing up at the table. And I've got myself convinced, even though I know it's not true, that I need to know everything before I can let my players touch it.
I think I tend to fall into the other category. I think a lot of people build from session 0, whatever, wherever we start the campaign. They build the area around that. And this is what a lot of very experienced DMs will recommend. You don't have to build everything else up. Build that area up, and as your players go, work your way out, which sounds a lot like what Fraud Syndrome's talking about here. I tend to do the opposite. When I homebrew, my first question is, how does this world fit in the cosmology of the universe? And then my question is, what is the history of the world? And again, very broad overview. But I start to work my way in. Where I get bogged down is the minutia, the details of the villagers' names, and or even the names of small villages, and those specific things. I have a habit. I want to hand wave it. But I think either way, you're exactly right. This is a balancing act that every DM has to perform when they attempt to homebrew. There's no right answers as long as you have what you need to feel prepared for each session. Because it doesn't feel good when your players start asking you questions and you don't have any of the answers.
Sure.
But again, I think a lot of people, and like you said, yours may never see the table because you're just kind of building those details on and on and on. I think you can take that so far that it's right. You'll never play it. And a homebrew that you don't get to play, it may be fun, but it's nice to have that experienced by others and be able to share it. So, build up your starting area, and work out enough, maybe work out ideas in the world, maybe think about big players in the world. And so you can hint at them. And then as that world opens up, more and more of that is revealed. But if you can introduce the evil empire when your first level characters are fighting goblins around the village hamlet, then it's not a shock to the system when they finally encounter them 7 levels later, and they run into some of those soldiers and recognize them.
Yeah, and it can make it that much more impactful because it's an established part of the setting that they're finally colliding with.
Yeah.
You want to get the second part of Fraud Syndrome's comment?
Absolutely. So he says here, a more specific one is when I ran, and I've never heard of this, but I feel like I need to know more. When I ran Cracker Barrel Has Fallen, a zombie survival game set in a Waffle House. First of all, this is my definition of true horror. I cannot lose Cracker Barrel. But he says, once again, this is up that they did for their podcast, so we need to find Fraud Syndrome FF's podcast. I need to listen to this. In an effort to keep everyone around and engaged for the session and for the episodes, I hedged about killing off characters, even when they did things that should have absolutely gotten them killed.
Yeah. By the way, the show is called To D&D or Not to D&D.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
so
I'm going to check that out as soon
as
we get done here, because I have to hear about Cracker Barrel Has Fallen.
I do want to play in this game.
Yeah.
But no, to Fraud Syndrome's point here, you're trying to pull some punches because you don't want to hurt your friends' feelings, or, in this case, if you've got the podcast going and you want to preserve those characters. Man, in a game like Cracker Barrel Has Fallen and it's a zombie apocalypse, characters should be dying. Depends on the nature of the game.
I get it, though. We all understand that if characters can't die, that really changes the dynamic of a game. Like, it changes everybody's attitude towards the game. And maybe there's, if it's a really super laid back, but if it's anything serious, there has to be that threat of death, right? And so, but at the same time, most people kind of feel bad. And sometimes more so if you know that person is mature and is going to take it well. But you're like, gosh, their barbarian is so cool. And like, they've had these awesome moments. And, now they're going to get taken down by this lame skeleton. And I don't want to do this, but sometimes we're hesitant to kill players. But this is maybe a little foreshadowing of something we might talk about in another episode. But for me, the solution is I've started rolling in front of the PCs or the players. I do that because I want to make a decision as far as how this interaction is going to go. And then I have a tendency to be like, oh, it'd be so much cooler if this happened, but in that case, I let the dice be the arbiter. And so if the dice say you die, you die, and so it's more detached, I guess.
Right. I mean, we've got to remember we're using dice in most of our games, or if not, cards, or as a resolution mechanic. So if you're not ready or willing to follow the results, then don't make the roll.
Right. Well, there's a discussion to be had there.
Sure. Let's
not today.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree.
Thanks again to Fraud Syndrome FF. Moving on, I'll take this one. 1H30N3003 says, I had the god of metagaming power players, or as he was called, the fast-forward guy. He wanted to skip past anything non-combat and all levels before his build reached one-punch PC power. I accepted his fast-forward request. Worst choice of my TTRPG life.
He basically just wants to go from combat to combat, play the character. I get it. Like, for me, I love building characters, and I see combat as an opportunity to test those builds.
Stress test, yeah.
So that's a fun part for me. I also recognize that not everybody at the table shares that interest.
Sure.
I wonder how they felt about fast forwarding through everything that wasn't combat.
Right. And not just everything that's not combat, but as he said, all levels before he reaches a certain power level. So he wants a combat focused game at high level play. That's a very specific type of campaign. So, that's a conversation with that player. Look, maybe this isn't the game for you.
Yeah. I mean, this is some session zero discussion, but everybody needs to be involved, DM and all players, and say, is this really what we want to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe you have 5 like-minded people who are like, look, I'm just here to slay everything. I want to be 13th level, and I want to just kill one thing to the next.
I'm all out of bubblegum.
And if the DM's okay with that, if you're like, well, I can make that work, great, go for it.
No.
Right? There's no wrong answers in that regard. But, wow, it's kind of, for a lot of people, this is not going to be an appealing style of play.
No, and you're right. So many of these issues all go back to having that discussion about expectations from the jump. Why don't you take us on to Demi Mears' comment?
So Demi Mears says, my first time storytelling, I railroaded a player by removing a massively important NPC, the love of his life, from his character's backstory, off screen where he couldn't save him, to show how evil the big bad was in the second session. He built his character around this NPC, and the table got tense. I apologized and listened and have grown from it over the past decade, but I always remember it with prepping for sessions. Thank you, Demi Mears. And so the point here is removing an important NPC off screen.
In the second session.
Second session.
If this had happened down the line after the campaign is developed, you've really built that antagonist up. Okay, I'm a little more on board there. It just feels the timing was too soon.
What about the fact that it was done off screen?
I don't know. Off screen does present some issues of its own. What's your take on this?
What's there? It says off screen where he couldn't save him. So there was no opportunity for the player. There was nothing for them to do, and it was to show how evil the big bad was, which I get.
Right.
We just had a discussion before we started recording today about a hero is only as good as their villain.
Yeah.
Right? And how important it is to build up that antagonist. And I think that's true. In this case, though, you sort of got away the benefits versus the cost. And so in this case, you've taken away a big part of this character's motivation. The character feels helpless to stop that. And does it accomplish the goal? I mean, I'm certainly this character would have a vendetta against the antagonist, but really at this point, I think the character could have just said in the backstory, antagonist X killed the love of my life, and so I want revenge.
Sure.
So you never gave that NPC an opportunity to develop, to really become a living, breathing part of the world.
Yeah.
Because how much more significant would that be? You're not just losing, air quotes, the love of my life. You're losing at that point a character that you have grown to love and to care about, and there's an emotional investment there.
And maybe the other party members also.
Yes.
We get a chance to form a connection with that NPC, and not just that, as you say, on paper connection that the one PC has with that character.
Okay. You know what I love about this, and every one of these, it's the same idea. Hey, here's a mistake I made, and here's what I learned from it. In this case, when I prep a session, I think about that. I think about that instance. I think about what I could have done differently. That's the mark of a good DM.
Yeah.
That's somebody you want to play with.
Right. So, Demi Mears, you are probably doing A-OK these days. We thank you very much for that reply. Moving on, we've got Pixel Pink weighing in that says that they aimed for a full campaign instead of just a one-shot. They should have just aimed for a one-shot. Pixel Pink goes on to say, to be fair, my players weren't great for a first-time DM. I only got through 2 sessions before I felt like garbage, and I haven't really felt the desire to run anything since. That hurts me to read that.
First of all, it doesn't sound like you're maybe playing with very generous players for a first-time DM, so that's going to make things more difficult. There's a lot of pressure. People who have never DM'd don't necessarily understand that. I mean, you're not performing brain surgery, but you're having to do a lot of things that you're not accustomed to doing as a player in a tabletop game.
So be gentler with yourself.
Be gentler with yourself, and players, be gentle with your DMs, especially new DMs. Cut them some slack, because we need dungeon masters or game masters.
Gotta have them.
You gotta have them, and not everybody's interested in doing that. But the other thing is, they're human beings, so just be generous. Show them a little grace, and but besides that, it sounds like they recognize that basically they wanted to run, as it says, a one shot. And instead, they tried to make a full campaign out of it. I think we've all kind of had these ideas, these grandiose ideas.
Oh, yes. I can really relate to this particular feeling of thinking I should have just done a one-shot, something I'd be more comfortable with instead of a full campaign. Recently wrapped up, and you played in this, a years-long Call of Cthulhu campaign, I had Masks of Nyarlathotep on my bucket list. This incredible, complex, globe-spanning, conspiracy-laden Call of Cthulhu campaign. It's awesome.
It is.
And, you know, I got the big Mondo prop set from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. I highly recommend that if you're going to run Masks of Nyarlathotep.
That was fun.
Treat yourself to that deluxe prop set. But the issue is I had never run Call of Cthulhu in my life. And I bit off way more than I could chew. I would have been far better served to run a couple of Call of Cthulhu one-shots, warm up to the system, understand how to run and execute a mystery game, and then, if everybody is enjoying that style of play, say, okay, let's step into something bigger, something larger, something that I feel like I can handle now. I was never comfortable at the table. We started that, I think, in the campaign begins in 1921. We began in 2021. 2021, and we just wrapped that up in 2024. So it was a few years running, which I guess that in itself is a success. Mm-hmm. But I was never confident, never comfortable. I never felt prepared for anything.
I will say, as a player in the aforementioned Cthulhu campaign, it was a blast. I think we all enjoyed it, but I also understand second guessing yourself.
Yeah, so, when you're on the other side of things.
Absolutely.
So Pixel Pink, we certainly hope, and we empathize, and we certainly hope that you are not soured forever. Find a one-shot you're interested in, the system that you want to play, that you might be passionate about, a one-shot that has a nice story that you want to tell at the table, quick and tidy. Find some people that you trust that you can share a table with, and maybe rekindle whatever that was in you that made you want to run in the first place.
I hope they can find that. Shadow of Ion says, I'm making a TTRPG and had friends testing it. The pacing for the main plot made the party put any new development with it as high priority, like drop everything, we got to stop the masked evildoers.
Mm-hmm.
This somewhat bummed them out because they really wanted downtime so they could engage with the various types of crafting, and one had a garden to supply the town food. So I planned to give them a week in-game before one of the NPCs found a letter that would serve as a plot hook, hidden away in leftover furniture the NPC received when the party cleared a nearby bandit outpost. So the party's heading back to the bandit outpost, and they cleared it, wanting to completely demolish it for lumber and whatever else they left behind, anything to help rebuild the town they're helping. All of a sudden I think, hey, this would be a good time for them to find that bandit letter. I have them roll to find it, which they do, and know they're talking about what they should do next. Why did I do that? That was supposed to be found later so they could craft, and oh man, I'm dumb. It really sucked, especially because they were closing the end of their journey and the last couple of plot points basically domino into each other. So I blew my chance to give them an organic break.
GMs, we get antsy. Even though we have committed, all right, they want this downtime. I'm going to block out a week here of game time where they can do their thing. But we're always thinking about the world and what's happening and the movement and how things are colliding and, kind of wanting to push things forward. And, yeah, we get antsy. Let's just drop it in now. I can imagine him watching himself in slow motion. What are you going to do?
Yeah, and I love the reaction. Wait, why did I do that? That's probably my mental quote every session I've ever GM'd. Wait, why did I do that?
Right.
So, yeah, Shadow of Ion, appreciate that comment.
Stardust Hippie says, biggest GM regret? Not starting sooner. I didn't get into TTRPGs until my late 20s. I knew some folks that played in high school, but thought it sounded lame at the time. Oh, the follies of youth. Yeah, Stardust Hippie. I think that's going to make a lot of folks' lists. I wish I had started sooner. Yeah,
I wanted to start sooner. I just didn't know anybody that played, so
right.
I had Had to find them first.
We each had, growing up, that curiosity. We were into fantasy. I mean, you had some just random D&D books, right? Then you had the monstrous manual, the binder.
Yes, it was the binder, and that was the first book I bought. And
didn't know what any of the numbers meant.
None of it made sense to me, but I loved it. Yeah. I went through and just every monster meticulously read about their ecology and what they would do in combat, but I didn't know a player's handbook was the thing I needed.
Sure.
You learn that eventually. And it's like with all things, there's a lot of TTRPGs I haven't experienced. I would like to, and I'm already old, way older than my 20s. But you know what? Hopefully I'll have a chance to do that, and it's never too late. You just appreciate the experiences that you're able to have now.
Stardust Hippie, we thank you for the reply.
Okay. Is this Oa Gwark?
Or Oh Hi Gwark?
Oh Hi Gwark. I don't know.
I'm not sure what the proper pronunciation here is.
It says, not running a pre-written module or one shot before I tried writing/running my own thing. I fumbled through a few sessions before the campaign died. I thought I was bad at DMing. I tried again with Witchlight and loved it. My players loved it. We all had an amazing time. I just needed to get used to telling a story and running things, thinking on my feet, figuring out what does and doesn't work for me and my friends. With that under my belt, I'm now infinitely more confident and finally moving on to writing my own stories. Okay. Yeah, the initial experience. Is it better to run a pre-written campaign versus some homebrew initially?
Anytime I'm picking up a new system, I always want to take a look at a scenario, a module, an adventure, whatever you want to call it, to see how the system design should manifest in play. What should a scenario for this system look like? What should a series of encounters be like? How much investigation should go along with the action? Just to see how someone that is closely familiar with the system has put together something to use for that system.
Yeah, you basically have something to base what you're doing off of. I mean, it sounds like he had a great experience when he ran this campaign. It was terrible beforehand, but I bet now if he went back and made some homebrew, I bet it would be a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's seen how they do it, and I think with all of us, we found things we loved and we wanted to reapply, and we found things that we were like, why did they do this?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it that way. I might take this route instead. So there's value whether you enjoy that pre-written module or not. Either way, you're taking something from it that you can put into your own work.
Absolutely.
Or not put into your own work.
Yeah, it's the more experience you have with that, and don't just take one source. Every time you're going to find things in a pre-written module that you like, things that you hate, use it all. Different systems are going to teach you tricks to manage resources, to manage encounters. Use all of it.
Okay, thanks again to Oh Hi Gwark and everybody else over on the TTRPG subreddit. We've got one final comment. This one comes from Grant at Broken Synapse Press on Blue Sky. Hey, Grant. He says, memory like a hockey goalie. Regrets? Sure. Can I remember the specifics? Not if I can help it.
Well,
that is good practice.
Yeah. You can't remember any specifics, and he doesn't want to. So I get that too.
Yeah. No regrets.
Yeah. Sometimes you just don't look back.
Yep. Let it all roll off. Hey, big thanks again to everybody who weighed in. We've all got regrets. The best we can do is try to learn from our mistakes, move forward to craft a better game tomorrow. How's that?
Right? I like that.
That'll do it for the Lowdown. That'll do it for this episode of Thieves' Cant. Coming up next time, it's going to be a Thieves' Cant top 5. Let's talk some general GM tips so that we can avoid regrets and have that better game. So our top 5 GM tips coming up next time. In the meantime, if you want to find us online, Thieves' Cant Cast on the socials, thievescantcast@gmail.com. If you want to shoot us some hate mail, that's the best place to do it. Now, Chris, any parting words?
Just keep playing, keep GMing. Ignore that little voice in your head that says you're doing a terrible job, and certainly any players that say that. Just keep learning from your mistakes, and that's about it.
Hey, for Chris, I'm Jeremy. This is Thieves Can't. We will see you next time. So long.
Thank you for listening to Thieves Can't. Email thievescantcast@gmail.com.